Berlin.
All about Berlin, with visiting and touring information, geography, history, attractions, and author points of interest.
Dr. Sydney Soclof. drsydney22@gmail.com. 2022. Narration by Dr. Sydney Soclof,
Zoe Phonemes,
and Nathan Koltove. For a more complete discussion of YouTube navigation, please go to this video using the link here.
Chapter 1. Introduction to Berlin.
This is the flag of Berlin.
This is the Berlin coat of arms. A bear features very prominently on the flag and official seal of the city of Berlin, but, contrary to popular belief, the origins of the city name Berlin have nothing to do with bears.
Berlin seems to derive from an older Slavic word berl, which means swamp, marsh, or very damp place.
Nevertheless, bears are used as the symbol of the city, and brightly painted statues of bears abound.
Berlin is the capital and largest city of Germany. It is also one of the 16 states, or Bundesländer of Germany.
Berlin is surrounded by the German state of Brandenburg.
Berlin is the political and cultural center of Germany, and due to its division into West Berlin and East Berlin from 1949 to 1990, is one of the most diverse cities in the European Union.
Berlin is an important crossroads for the states of the expanding European Union. It is the home of many of the national economic, cultural, and educational institutions of Germany.
Berlin hosts some of the most prominent universities, research faculties, theaters, and museums in Europe. It has gained an international reputation for its festivals, nightlife, and contemporary architecture.
Since the reunification of Germany in 1990, Berlin has again become the capital of Germany. It is also the seat of most of the executive and legislative branches of the German government.
Chapter 2. Population of Berlin. How big is Berlin?
Here is the population of the 11 largest cities of Europe, not including the suburban areas. We see that Berlin is in fourth place with a population of 3.6 million.
However, when we look at metropolitan areas in Europe, we see that Berlin is now in 12th place, with a metropolitan area population of 6 million.
Chapter 3. Location of Berlin. Where is Berlin?
Here a map of North-Central Europe. Berlin is in the northeastern part of Germany, close to Poland, and not far from the North Sea.
Berlin is on the rivers Spree and Havel, and completely surrounded by the German federal state of Brandenburg.
This is the German federal state of Brandenburg.
This shows the Nordost-Sea Canal, also known as the Kiel Canal, the port city of Warnemunde, and Berlin. The Kiel Canal connects the North Sea to the Baltic Sea.
The straight line distance from Berlin to Rostock, near Warnemunde, and the Baltic Sea, or Ostsee, is 120 miles, or 193 kilometers.
The distance from Berlin to the border with Poland on the Oder River at Frankfurt Unter Oder is only about 49 miles, or 80 kilometers. Before World War II, the border with Poland was much further east from Berlin, as we shall see later. Chapter 4. Warnemunde.
Warnemunde is a seaport on the Baltic, or Ostsee. It is at the mouth of the Warnow River, about 10 miles, or 15 kilometers from the center of Rostock.
Warnemunde is a seaside resort that has been part of the much larger city of Rostock since 1323.
Warnemunde is one of the most popular seaside resorts on the Baltic Sea.
This is the promenade along the beach with the Hotel Neptune in the background.
These are tourist shops and restaurants in Warnemunde.
This shows the location of the cruise ship terminal with respect to the points of interest in Warnemunde.
Here is the region between Warnemunde and Rostock.
The lighthouse at the entrance to the Warnemunde-Rostock harbor dates back to 1898.
This shows the location of the train station, or Bahnhof in Warnemunde for connections to Berlin. The fastest train to Berlin takes 2.5 hours and the slowest takes up to 4.25 hours. Chapter 5. Rostock.
Rostock is the largest city in the German state of Mecklenburg-West Pomerania.
Rostock has a population of 200,000. It dates back to a Slavic settlement in the 12th century and was chartered in 1218.
Rostock was an important member of the Hanseatic League in the 14th century.
The Hanseatic League was an alliance of trading cities that established and maintained a trade monopoly over the Baltic Sea and most of northern Europe for over 400 years, between the 13th and 17th centuries.
Tallinn, formerly Revel, in Estonia, was also a member of the Hanseatic League, as was also Riga in Latvia.
One of the most picturesque places in Rostock is the Neue, or New Market Square.
The town hall on Neue New Market Square was originally built in the 13th century, but extensively transformed in the 18th century, with the addition of a Baroque facade and a banqueting hall.
The New Market Square also preserves 6 original, beautifully restored gable houses from the 15th and 16th centuries. The rest of the old houses in Hanseatic style that once bordered the square were destroyed in an Allied air raid in 1942.
Rostock was extensively developed after World War II as East Germany's principal ocean port. Since the reunification of East and West Germany, however, the harbor's relative importance declined as other ports, notably Hamburg, recovered their historic trade areas.
Chapter 6. Berlin.
Berlin is Germany's largest industrial city and a major center of trade and technological development. Many companies maintain facilities in the city, especially in the areas of electrical machinery and electronics.
To a large extent, traditional economic activities, greatly reduced by World War II, have been revived throughout Greater Berlin. These include the production of textiles, metals, clothing, porcelain and china, bicycles, and machinery.
Electronics became a principal post-war industry. The production of food, chemicals, cigarettes, and confectionery continues.
The area around Berlin and to the north was scoured by glaciers in the last ice age, around 10,000 years ago. This left behind a relatively flat landscape with sandy soil, dotted with many lakes and drained by many small rivers.
Here is the Berlin metropolitan area. Berlin is on sandy glacial soil, in the wide valley of the Spree River. The Spree is a tributary of the Havel that connects it to the Elbe River, and then to the North Sea.
Berlin was founded on the banks of the Spree River, and even today the Spree runs right through the middle of the city.
The river Spree goes through the center of Berlin, close by the Reichstag and the Brandenburg Gate.
This shows a tour boat on the Spree through Berlin.
This again shows a tour boat on the Spree through Berlin.
Berlin extends over a large area, approximately 23 miles, or 37 kilometers from north to south, and 28 miles, or 45 kilometers from east to west.
Berlin is divided into a number of districts. The historical heart of the city is in the Mitte, or Middle, district. This was in East Berlin when the city was divided.
This shows the route of the Berlin Wall, which was erected in 1961 and torn down in 1989. The Berlin Wall completely encircled West Berlin, separating it from East Berlin and from Communist East Germany.
The Tiergarten district became the new center of West Berlin. Now, after the reunification of Berlin, it is the two downtown or central areas of the Tiergarten district and the Mitte district.
Most of the historical sites and points of interest for the tourists are in and near the Mitte, Tiergarten, and Charlottenburg districts.
Most of the points of interest in Berlin are in the central area of Mitte in the east and Tiergarten in the west, but they are only about 2 miles or 3.5 kilometers apart on either side of the former Berlin Wall at the Brandenburg Gate.
Our two main points of reference will be the Brandenburg Gate in the east and the Zoological Garden train station in the west, with the Tiergarten in the middle.
The points of interest near the Zoological Garden train station are in what was formerly West Berlin. The points of interest near the Brandenburg Gate are mostly in what was East Berlin. The approximate route of the Berlin Wall is shown here.
The Tiergarten, or in German, Animal Garden, is an area in Mitte. It is a very large park that before reunification was part of West Berlin. There is a large zoo within the Tiergarten.
Chapter 7. Points of interest in East Berlin.
The Brandenburg Gate is perhaps the most important symbol of Berlin in Germany, past and present. It was commissioned by Frederick Wilhelm II as a sign of peace, and built between 1788 and 1791.
This is the Brandenburg Gate in 1871, after the unification of the German Empire.
Above the Brandenburg Gate is the quadriga, consisting of the goddess of peace, driving the four-horse chariot in triumph.
This is the Brandenburg Gate in the Nazi era.
The Brandenburg Gate was heavily damaged during the Battle of Berlin at the end of World War II.
This shows the course of the Berlin Wall. The Brandenburg Gate was just behind the wall in the eastern sector.
This is the Brandenburg Gate behind the Berlin Wall.
These are the 4 sectors of Berlin under Allied occupation.
In 1961, the Brandenburg Gate was closed when the Berlin Wall was built.
The Brandenburg Gate was modeled after the Acropolis of Athens. This is the Brandenburg Gate as it looks today.
The Reichstag building in Berlin was constructed to house the Reichstag, the original parliament of the German Empire. It was opened in 1894 and housed the Reichstag until the fire in 1933.
The Reichstag building is just a very short distance north of the Brandenburg Gate.
The Reichstag building is adjacent to the Spree River.
This is the Reichstag about 1900.
The Reichstag building was set on fire under mysterious circumstances in 1933.
The Reichstag again became the seat of the German parliament in 1999, after a major reconstruction.
The parliament of today's Germany is called the Bundestag. The German term Reichstag now refers to the building, while the term Bundestag refers to the legislative body that meets inside the building.
The huge glass cupola that was erected on the roof as a gesture to the original 1894 cupola is one of the most visited attractions in Berlin, giving an impressive view over the city, especially at night.
Chapter 7a Unter den Linden. The Brandenburg Gate marks the western end of the most famous street of pre-World War II Berlin, Unter den Linden.
The section west of the Brandenburg Gate, going through the Tiergarten Park, is called now Strasse des 17 Juni, having previously been called Charlottenburger Strasse.
Unter den Linden, while under the lindens, is named for its linden or lime trees which line the grassed pedestrian mall between the two roadways. It is one of Berlin's most splendid boulevards.
A boulevard of linden trees was planted from 1647 extending from the Electoral Palace to the gates of the city by Frederick Wilhelm the Great Elector, who wanted to ride from his castle to his hunting park, the Tiergarten, with Baroque splendor.
Unter den Linden became the best-known and grandest street in Berlin.
The rich history of the Prussian era is reflected in the buildings along Unter den Linden.
The Brandenburg Gate is located in the Pariser Platz at the end of Unter den Linden.
This is the new Hotel Adlon.
This is the Hotel Adlon in 1937. The original Hotel Adlon was built in 1907 with the support of Kaiser Wilhelm II, and became the most beautiful and most luxurious hotel in the world.
The new Hotel Adlon was rebuilt on the site of the old hotel and opened in 1997.
A short distance further down Unter den Linden is the massive Russian embassy.
This shows the location of the Russian embassy.
Humboldt University is Berlin's oldest university. Founded in 1810 as the University of Berlin, Universität zu Berlin, by the liberal Prussian educational reformer and linguist Wilhelm von Humboldt.
Humboldt University is a little further along the Unter den Linden.
Humboldt University is a public university with 37,000 students. The university has been home to many of Germany's greatest thinkers of the past 2 centuries.
This is Wilhelm von Humboldt and his more well-known younger brother Alexander von Humboldt, a famous naturalist and scientist.
Directly across Unter den Linden from Humboldt University is the Staatsoper, or the State Opera House, and the Opernplatz, now called the Bebelplatz.
This shows the location of the Staatsoper, State Opera House, and the Bebelplatz.
On May 10, 1933, on the Opernplatz in Berlin, SA and Nazi youth groups burned around 20,000 books from the Humboldt University, including works by Thomas Mann, Erich Maria Remarque, Heinrich Heine, Karl Marx and H. G. Wells.
A monument to the book burning can now be found in the center of Bebelplatz.
The memorial consists of a glass panel opening onto an underground white room, with empty shelf space for 20,000 volumes, and a plaque.
The plaque has this quotation from an 1820 work by Heinrich Heine, who attended Humboldt University.
Jewish students and scholars and political opponents of Nazis were kicked out of the university and often deported and killed.
This is an adjacent plaque.
This is the Bebelplatz, with the Staatsoper on the left, and Hedwig's Cathedral in the background.
The Staatsoper Unter den Linden is the home of a prominent German opera company.
St. Hedwig's Cathedral, or in German, St. Hedwig's Kathedrale, is a Roman Catholic cathedral on the Bebelplatz.
St. Hedwig's Cathedral was built by Frederick the Great, King of Prussia, and opened in 1773. The cathedral was named after the patron saint of Silesia and Brandenburg, St. Hedwig of Ondex.
The Zeughaus, or Old Arsenal of Berlin, is the oldest structure on the Unter den Linden. It was erected between 1695 and 1706 in the Baroque style, to be used as an artillery arsenal.
The Zeughaus was transformed into a military museum in 1875.
Today the Zeughaus is the site of the Deutsches Historisches Museum, or the German Historical Museum.
Shortly beyond the Zeughaus, the Unter den Linden ends. Beyond that is a bridge over the Spree River, the Museum Island, and then the Karl-Liebknecht-Strasse.
This is an aerial view showing Unter den Linden leading up to the bridge over to the Museum Island.
The Berliner Dom, or Berlin Cathedral, is on the Museum Island.
The Berliner Dom, or Berlin Cathedral, is a magnificent church considered to be the Protestant St. Peter's. It was built in 1905 to replace several earlier structures.
This shows the Berliner Dom, Berlin Cathedral, adjacent to the Unter den Linden.
A good view of the Berlin Cathedral can be had from a cruise boat on the Spree River and canals.
Chapter 7b. Museum Island.
Berlin is a city of museums, with 170 museums that house history, art, and knowledge. Many of the most important museums are on Museum Island.
Museum Island, in German, Museumsinsel, is the name of the northern half of an island in the Spree River, in Berlin Mitte, and in the center of the city. The museums on Museum Island are some of the most important in the world.
The Museum Island, German, Museumsinsel, is just to the north of Unter den Linden, and not far from Alexanderplatz.
The Old Museum, Altes Museum, is the oldest museum building in Berlin.
This is the Old Museum, Altes Museum, on the Museum Island.
The Old Museum was finished in 1830 according to the plans by Prussian architects Karl Friedrich Schinkel. It was erected opposite the no longer existing Berlin Castle.
The new museum, or Neues Museum, is located behind the Old Museum.
The new museum was completed in 1859. It was nearly destroyed in World War II, with only some of the outer walls remaining, and is presently being restored. After the completion, it will present collections of Egyptian and prehistory.
The Old National Gallery, Alte Nationalgalerie, was completed in 1876 to host a collection of 19th-century art.
The Alte Nationalgalerie has one of the largest collections of 19th-century sculptures and paintings in Germany. The building was badly damaged in World War II, and was only completely restored and reopened in 2001.
The Bode Museum is at the northern tip of the Museum Island.
The Bode Museum was opened in 1904 under the name of the Kaiser Friedrich Museum.
The Bode Museum has collections of sculptures and late antique and Byzantine art.
The Pergamon Museum, completed in 1930, is the newest museum on Museum Island.
The Pergamon Museum has original size, reconstructed monumental buildings,
such as the Pergamon altar and the Market Gate of Miletus, consisting of parts taken from the original excavation sites.
Continuing up, Karl-Liebknecht-Strasse brings us to the Alexanderplatz and the Fernsehturm or television tower.
Chapter 7c. Alexanderplatz.
Alexanderplatz is a large open square and public transport hub in central Berlin, near the Spree River and the Berliner Dom. Berliners often call it simply Alex.
Alexanderplatz in 1945, like much of the rest of the city, was almost completely destroyed by Allied bombing during the war. The few buildings that were left standing were so badly damaged that they had to be torn down as well, necessitating the total rebuilding of the square after the war.
Alexanderplatz was named in honor of a visit of the Russian Tsar Alexander I to Berlin in 1805.
The heyday of Alexanderplatz was in the 1920s, when together with the Potsdamer Platz, it was at the heart of Berlin's nightlife.
This is Alexanderplatz today.
The Fernsehturm, or Berlin Television Tower, is the second tallest structure in Europe, at 1,200 feet or 365 meters.
From the observation level of the Fernsehturm, you can get an excellent view of the center of the city.
The tower was completed in 1969, to mark the 20th anniversary of the founding of East Germany.
Many historic buildings are located in the area around Alexanderplatz, including the traditional seat of city government, the Rotes Rathaus, or Red City Hall.
The Red Town Hall, in German, Rotes Rathaus, is the City Hall of Berlin. Completed in 1869, it is the home to the governing mayor and the provincial government of Berlin.
The name of the building dates from the facade design with red clinker bricks.
This is the Rotes Rathaus.
Chapter 7d. Nikolaiviertel.
Nikolaiviertel, or St. Nicholas Quarter, is a small district in the historic center of Berlin, and close to the Alexanderplatz.
A short distance southeast of the Rotes Rathaus is the oldest section of Berlin, the Nikolaiviertel, or Nikolai Quarter along the Spree River.
This shows the Nikolaiviertel with the Nikolaikirche and the Rotes Rathaus.
The narrow streets of the Nikolaiviertel are a favorite place for strolling, especially for tourists. The area, which borders the Spree River, contains some of the oldest buildings in Berlin before it was turned into wasteland at the end of the World War II.
The center of this area is a pedestrian precinct, and within it are many old buildings, including the Nikolaikirche, or St. Nicholas Church, the oldest church in Berlin.
The original building of Nikolaikirche was built around 1230, and dedicated to St. Nicholas, the patron saint of sailors and merchants. The latest structure dates in part from 1470.
The church now houses a museum recounting the history of the city.
Chapter 7E. Checkpoint Charlie.
This shows the location of Checkpoint Charlie, with respect to the Brandenburg Gate, and Unter den Linden.
Close by the location of Checkpoint Charlie is the Checkpoint Charlie Museum, or House im Checkpoint Charlie.
Checkpoint Charlie Museum offers an exhibition about the Berlin Wall in the style of the 1970s. A section of the Berlin Wall is on display.
Chapter 7F. The Jewish Museum.
A few blocks south of Checkpoint Charlie is the Jewish Museum of Berlin. This is a museum covering 2,000 years of German Jewish history.
The Jewish Museum of Berlin was opened in 2001, and is noted for its striking and innovative design.
The new Jewish Museum replaced an earlier museum that was closed by the Nazis in 1933. With a gleaming metal exterior, the Jewish Museum is one of the city's most spectacular buildings, and a major tourist attraction.
Chapter 7G. The Neue Synagogue.
A few blocks north of the Museum Island is the magnificent new synagogue that was opened in 1866 as Germany's largest synagogue.
The synagogue was desecrated by the Nazis during the infamous Kristallnacht pogrom on November 9, 1938.
The new synagogue was destroyed in 1943 by Allied bombing.
The building was finally demolished in 1958. And it was not until after the fall of the wall that a reconstruction started.
The new synagogue was officially reopened in 1991, 125 years after its first opening.
In May 1995, the new synagogue was finally fully restored.
Chapter 7H. The Holocaust Memorial.
Just to the south of the Brandenburg Gate is the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe, also known as the Holocaust Memorial.
The location of the Holocaust Memorial was the site of the Imperial Chancellery of Adolf Hitler during the Third Reich. The memorial was opened in 2005, and is located 1 block south of the Brandenburg Gate.
This is the Berlin Holocaust Memorial.
This is an aerial view of the Holocaust Memorial site.
This is the Berlin Holocaust Memorial.
Chapter 7I. Potsdamer Platz.
Potsdamer Platz is an important square and traffic intersection in central Berlin.
Potsdamer Platz is about 1 mile, or 1.5 kilometers south of the Brandenburg Gate.
Potsdamer Platz is named after the nearby city of Potsdam.
This is Potsdamer Platz in 1902.
This is Potsdamer Platz in 1919.
This is Potsdamer Platz in the 1920s.
In the 1920s and 1930s, the Potsdamer Platz was one of the busiest traffic centers in all of Europe. It was also one of the liveliest squares in Europe.
The Potsdamer Platz was a major public transport hub, and the area contained numerous bars, cafes and cinemas.
This is Potsdamer Platz in 1930.
This is Potsdamer Platz in the 1930s.
This all came to an abrupt end in 1943, when the Potsdamer Platz was reduced to ruins by Allied bombing.
After the Second World War, the Potsdamer Platz, located between the American, British and Russian sectors, became a no-man's land.
It was completely flattened with the construction of the wall in 1961, when the demolished buildings were pulled down.
In the 1990s, the Potsdamer Platz became the largest construction area in Europe. The square, together with several adjacent blocks, were redeveloped.
The projects included several landmark towers, a shopping arcade, an entertainment center and residential buildings. The large new underground station, shopping arcade and entertainment center have brought new life to the Potsdamer Platz.
The Sony Center in the Potsdamer Platz includes an IMAX theater and an office tower.
The Potsdamer Platz now attracts about 70,000 visitors a day.
There is still a section of the Berlin Wall left in the Potsdamer Platz.
The Potsdamer Platz has become a must-see for visitors, a top shopping area for Berliners, and a favorite place for film fans. With more than 40 screens and 3 cinemas, a film academy and a film museum.
This is the Potsdamer Platz today.
Chapter 8. Points of interest in West Berlin.
The second major area of interest in Berlin is centered in the western area around the newer shopping street, the Kurfürstendamm or Kudamm. This is on the other side of the Tiergarten from the Brandenburg Gate.
This area is easily accessible from the Zoologischer Garten train station.
The Zoologischer Garten train station is where several main transportation routes converge.
Here is the Zoologischer Garten train station. The Zoologischer Garten, or zoo itself, is located in the Tiergarten.
The Berlin Zoologischer Garten is one of the biggest zoos in Germany, and the one with the largest number of species in the world.
The Zoologischer Garten was established in 1844, and was the first zoo in Germany. During World War II, the zoo area was completely destroyed, and only 91 animals survived.
The Berlin Zoo is the most visited zoo in Europe, with approximately 2.6 million visitors per year, from all over the world.
The Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial is one of Berlin's most famous landmarks.
The Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church is located near the zoo train station at the Platz, the center of former West Berlin. It is still the commercial center of Berlin, with a Kurfürstendamm, or Kudamm shopping street and Europa Center nearby.
The original church was built between 1891 and 1895 by Kaiser Wilhelm II. It was a symbol of Prussian unity and a mark of honor for his grandfather, Kaiser Wilhelm I.
The church was almost completely destroyed during World War II.
In 1961, a new octagonal church was completed around the remains of the old church, which was kept as a ruin in memory of the horrors of war.
This is the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church.
This structure and its adjacent hexagonal bell tower feature honeycomb patterns of stained glass.
Europa Center is next to the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church on the famous shopping boulevard, the Kurfürstendamm.
There are almost 100 shops in the Europa Center.
This is the famous water clock inside the Europa Center.
Near the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church, the Kurfürstendamm takes a bend and becomes Tauentzienstrasse. About 1 block east of the Europa Center on Tauentzienstrasse is Berlin's largest department store, the Kaufhaus des Westens, or KaDeWe.
The Kaufhaus des Westens is a very large department store that is said to be the largest such store in all of Europe.
Kaufhaus des Westens was built in 1907, destroyed in World War II, and in 1950.
The Kurfürstendamm is the most popular boulevard in Berlin, among Berliners and visitors alike.
This is a coffee house at the Kuhdamm, with the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church in the background.
Neue Kranzlehreck is a busy intersection on the Kurfürstendamm.
Chapter 8a. The Schloss Charlottenburg, or Charlottenburg Palace, is the largest palace in Berlin.
Schloss Charlottenburg, or Charlottenburg Palace, is located about 3 miles, or 4 kilometers northwest of the Zoo Station, in the Berlin district of Charlottenburg.
The Charlottenburg Palace is easily accessible from several U-Bahn and S-Bahn stations.
This is a more detailed location map of the Charlottenburg Palace.
The original central part was constructed between 1695 and 1699. It was intended as the summer home for Sophie Charlotte, the wife of Elector Frederick III.
The palace was severely damaged by Allied bombing in 1943, but it was meticulously reconstructed after the war.
The Schlossgarten, or Palace Garden, is just to the north of the palace, bordered by the Spree River.
This is the Schlosspark Charlottenburg.
Chapter 8b. Hop-on hop-off bus tours.
A good way for the first-time visitor to Berlin to see the principal sights is by way of a hop-off bus tour. One such tour is offered by City Sightseeing Berlin.
City Sightseeing Berlin offers 5 different tours of the city. The traditional tour includes all the major classic sites of Berlin on a 2-hour loop,
with 13 tour stops where one may get off the bus and then get back on another bus later on. The buses come by every 10 minutes.
This is a map of the City Sightseeing Berlin traditional tour and the Wall and Lifestyle tour.
These are the stops on the Wall and Lifestyle tour.
This is a map of the City Sightseeing Berlin West End tour.
Another hop-off bus line is the Tempelhofer bus tour. This company has all double-decker buses that circle Berlin all day long, with live guides providing entertaining commentary to the riders.
There is one route with 19 stops that can be taken as a hop-on, hop-off tour with a ticket that lasts for 1 day, or as a stay-on tour, in which case the whole route takes around 2 hours.
This tour has a live tour guide on board that gives commentary in German and English throughout the ride.
Chapter 8c. Almost any place in Berlin is easily and conveniently accessible by the Berlin subway underground network. The U-Bahn.
This is a map of the Berlin U-Bahn network.
In addition to the U-Bahn, the S-Bahn is a light rail system that extends further out into the metropolitan region.
Chapter 9. Potsdam.
Potsdam is the capital city of the federal state of Brandenburg, which surrounds, but does not include, Berlin.
Potsdam is on the Havel River, 16 miles, or 26 kilometers southwest of the center of Berlin.
Potsdam has a series of interconnected lakes, and is well known for its unique cultural landscapes, and in particular the parks and castles of Sanssouci, a World Heritage Site.
Potsdam was chosen for the hunting residence of Frederick Wilhelm I, Elector of Brandenburg in 1660. The city was later adopted as a residence of the Prussian royal family. The majestic buildings were mainly built during the reign of Frederick the Great.
Sanssouci, from French sans souci, meaning carefree, is the palace in the surrounding park of the same name in Potsdam. It was built between 1745 and 1747 to fulfill King of Prussia, Frederick the Great's wishes for a little summer palace in the Rococo style.
The palace and park of Sanssouci are often described as the Prussian Versailles.
Since 1990, Sanssouci and its extensive gardens have been a World Heritage Site under the protection of UNESCO.
This is the Schloss Sanssouci in Potsdam.
The Babelsberg Film Studio in Potsdam. Babelsberg is the oldest large-scale film studio in the world. It has produced films since 1912. Today it is Europe's largest film studio.
In 1911 to 1912, Deutsche Bioskop built its first studio, a 45 by 60-foot glass house at Babelsberg. Today, Studio Babelsberg mainly produces feature films.
Hundreds of films were filmed here, including Fritz Lang's Metropolis and Joseph von Sternberg's The Blue Angel. More recent productions include V for Vendetta, The Bourne Ultimatum, Valkyrie, Inglourious Bastards, The Grand Budapest Hotel, and The Hunger Games.
A good way for the first-time visitor to see the principal sights of Potsdam is by way of a hop-off bus tour. A hop-off bus tour is offered by the Potsdam City Tour.
The full loop is 105 minutes with live narration in English and German, and by headphones in English, German, French, Spanish, Italian, Russian, and Portuguese.
Another tour is offered by City Sightseeing Potsdam. City Sightseeing Potsdam has one loop with 7 stops, and narration in 7 languages. The full loop takes 105 minutes, and the buses come by every 30 minutes.
Chapter 10. Spandau.
Spandau is a western suburb of Berlin. This old fortress town is at the confluence of the Spree and Havel rivers, and until 1920, was an independent trading town, due to its position along the main west-to-east trade routes connecting Magdeburg and Berlin.
Spandau was granted its town charter in 1232, with the town on the Altstadtinsel, Old Town Island, and the castle on the Zitadelinsel, Citadel Island.
The Altstadt is easily accessible from Rathaus Spandau and Altstadt Spandau stations on the city's U-Bahn line U7, the Berlin-Spandau S-Bahn station, with both regional and intercity railway routes, is situated to the south of the Altstadt.
This is a map of Spandau showing the Altstadt, the Old Town, and the Citadel, the Citadel.
The Spandau Citadel, Citadel Spandau, is one of the best preserved Renaissance military structures of Europe. It was built from 1559 to 1594 on top of the ruins of a medieval fort on an island, created by the meeting of the Havel and the Spree.
The citadel is largely unchanged since its construction in the 16th century. It is entirely surrounded by water, with a bastion at each corner, which made it virtually impregnable.
The Spandau Citadel was designed to protect the town of Spandau. Now part of Berlin, in recent years it has been used as a museum, and has become a popular tourist spot.
A narrow bridge leads from the citadel to the gatehouse, home to a local museum, while other highlights include the Prince's Room and the 14th century residential quarters.
The Julius Tower, up 145 steps, provides magnificent views over the Old Town and the rivers.
Altstadt, Old Town, Spandau is the historic center of Spandau. The Altstadt is situated on the west bank of the Havel River, at the confluence with the Spree River. Altstadt was protected from attack by the Spandau Citadel, located on an island between the two rivers.
Chapter 11. The climate of Berlin.
Will it be hot? Or will it be cold in Berlin?
Here are the average high and low temperatures throughout the year in Berlin. Berlin has a temperate climate, with moderately warm summers with midsummer high temperatures in the low 70s Fahrenheit, 23 degrees Celsius. Winters are moderately cold, with midwinter highs in the 30 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 to 5 degrees Celsius, range, and lows down to 25 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 to 5 degrees Celsius, range.
Rainfall in Berlin.
Here is the rainfall throughout the year in Berlin. The yearly total is 23 inches, or 580 millimeters. We see that the time of higher rainfall is in the summer months of June through August.
Chapter 12. The History of Berlin.
Founded in the early 13th century, Berlin was the capital of the Mark of Brandenburg, and after 1701 the capital of the Kingdom of Prussia in 1871. Berlin became capital of the German Empire, and a focal point for the nation's history.
Berlin was a small town with a stockade around it, and on a trade route linking southern Europe with the Baltic Sea.
For some time up until the 15th century, some part of the area that would become Brandenburg was inhabited by the Slavic Wends, whose descendants still make up a part of the area's modern population.
Around 1200, two towns were founded on the banks of the river Spree, Cologne and Berlin. Berlin used the name of the existing Slavic village, Berl, which means swamp. Cologne may have been a new foundation, since its name, like Köln, represents Latin colonia, or colony.
The trading settlement of Köln is recorded in a charter for the first time in 1237.
The first document about the settlement of Berlin, built around the Nikolai Church, dates from 1244.
In 1307, Berlin and Köln established a common council.
In 1415, a Nuremberg viscount was granted the border region of Brandenburg. The Elector Frederick I began the foundation of the 500-year-old Hohenzollern dynasty.
In 1486, Berlin became the residence of the Elector of Brandenburg.
The 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, had a devastating effect on the population. Berlin was reduced to just 6,000 inhabitants.
Frederick Wilhelm I, of Brandenburg, 1640 to 1688, called the Great Elector, started a policy of immigration and religious tolerance.
This is Berlin in 1688.
In 1701, the Elector Frederick III of Brandenburg crowned himself king in Prussia, but not of Prussia, because he didn't possess all of Prussia. He turned Berlin into his court capital and made Berlin the capital of the new Kingdom of Prussia.
This shows the growth of Brandenburg-Prussia from 1440 to 1768.
This shows the growth of Brandenburg-Prussia from 1600 to 1795. Note the acquisition of the territory from Poland after 1772.
In 1732, the old city walls of Berlin were taken down and replaced by toll bars.
During the years 1740 to 1786, Frederick the Great turned Berlin into one of Europe's major capitals and a center of the Enlightenment.
Berlin University, now called Humboldt University, was founded in 1810. There was a revival of the sciences, literature, music, and theater.
Friedrich Wilhelm III reigned as King of Prussia from 1797 to 1840.
In the years following the failure of the March Revolution of 1848, Berlin developed into an industrial city.
Chapter 12a. Unification of Germany, 1871.
This shows the expansion of Prussia in the years 1807 to 1871. Note the formation of the German Empire following the Franco-Prussian War in 1871.
Prince Otto von Bismarck was Prime Minister of Prussia, and was instrumental in the unification of Germany in 1871.
The German states under the leadership of Prussia defeated France in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 1871.
At the conclusion of the 1870 to 1871 Franco-Prussian War, the German states unite. and King Wilhelm I of Prussia is crowned Emperor of the German Empire at Versailles.
The German word Kaiser means emperor, and comes from the Latin Caesar, after Julius Caesar, the first Roman emperor.
In a similar fashion, the Russian word Tsar means emperor, and also comes from the Latin Caesar, after Julius Caesar, the first Roman emperor.
This is the German Empire in the years 1871 to 1918. Although there are 26 German states, Prussia and Bavaria are the two dominant kingdoms of the German Empire.
From 1871 until the end of World War I, and the establishment of the Republic, the unified German Empire consisted of these 26 states, 4 kingdoms, 6 grand duchies, 5 duchies, 7 principalities, and 3 free cities.
After Berlin becomes the capital of the German Empire or Reich, it rapidly grows into a city with more than 1 million inhabitants. These years are called the Gründerjahre, the years of economic revival. Chapter 12b 1914 to 1945.
This is Berlin in the First World War.
Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated at the end of the First World War.
In the 1920s, a large number of suburbs and towns were incorporated into Greater Berlin, reaching a population of 4 million.
This is an advertisement for a cabaret on the Kurfürstendamm.
Berlin suffered greatly in the worldwide economic crisis of 1929.
There were 600,000 unemployed Berliners, and much political unrest in the worldwide economic crisis of 1929.
Hyperinflation in Germany. This is a 50 million mark banknote issued during the time of rampant inflation in Germany from 1921 to 1924.
By late 1923, it took 1 billion marks buy a loaf of bread.
In 1933, the National Socialists Nazis seized total power.
In 1933, the Nazis took total power in Germany.
The 1936 Summer Olympics were a big propaganda spectacle for the Nazis.
This is the Olympic Stadium in Berlin today.
Bombing raids devastated Berlin during World War II.
The Battle of Berlin in April 1945 destroyed much of Berlin.
Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945. Both Germany and Berlin were divided into 4 sectors by the Allies.
German Marshal Alfred Jodl signed the surrender of German armies in Reims, France on May 7, 1945, ending the war in Europe.
Chapter 12c. A divided Berlin.
From 1945 to 1994, the Allied occupation divided both Germany and Berlin into these 4 sectors.
Berlin was deep in the Soviet zone.
Large parts of pre-war Germany, Silesia, Pomerania, and East Prussia were annexed by Poland and by Russia. Part of East Prussia including Königsberg, now Kaliningrad.
Berlin was also divided into 4 sectors.
Chapter 12d. Berlin Airlift 1948.
In 1948, the Soviets blockaded Berlin. An airlift kept West Berliners alive for more than a year.
In the Soviet blockade of Berlin in 1948, the Berlin Airlift supplied West Berlin.
This is the Berlin Airlift map showing the airports that were used.
This shows the crossing points between East and West Berlin and East Germany. Also shown are the airfields, including Tempelhof, that were used during the Berlin Airlift of 1948.
On June 17, 1953 there was an uprising in East Berlin against the Soviet rule.
Chapter 12e. Berlin Wall.
In 1961, the Soviets erected a wall all around the western sectors of Berlin to keep people from fleeing East Berlin and East Germany to the west.
Construction of the Berlin Wall began in August 1961.
The section east of the Brandenburg Gate was Communist East Berlin until the fall of the Berlin Wall and reunification of Berlin in 1989.
This shows the area around the Brandenburg Gate. In the upper left is the Tiergarten.
After the Berlin Wall was erected in 1961, Checkpoint Charlie became one of several crossing points between East and West.
Checkpoint Charlie is in this area southeast of the Brandenburg Gate.
In addition to Checkpoint Charlie, there were several other crossing points into West Berlin from East Berlin and East Germany.
This is the location of Checkpoint Charlie on Friedrichstrasse, a few blocks south of the Unter and Linden.
The Berlin Wall was brightly painted on the western side. Those trying to cross the so-called death strip on the eastern side could be shot.
Checkpoint Charlie was constructed on Friedrichstrasse in the heart of Berlin. The Soviets simply called it the Friedrichstrasse crossing point.
This is a sign of Checkpoint Charlie.
This is a sign marking Checkpoint Charlie.
Checkpoint Charlie became a symbol of the Cold War, representing the separation of East and West, and for the East Germans a gateway to freedom.
Checkpoint Charlie was frequently featured in espionage movies and books, such as those by John le Carré.
The wall completely encircled West Berlin.
This is President John F. Kennedy and Mayor Willy Brandt at the Berlin Wall in 1963.
A treaty signed by the four occupying powers in 1971 guaranteed the right of way between the Federal Republic and West Berlin, and facilitated visits to East Berlin by West Berliners.
This is graffiti on the Berlin Wall.
Chapter 12F. Unification of Berlin.
The fall of the Berlin Wall occurred on November 9, 1989.
This is a newspaper headline announcing the fall of the Berlin Wall.
This is the fall of the Berlin Wall on November 9, 1989.
The two Germanies were officially reunited on October 3, 1990.
Once more, in 1991, Berlin became the capital of Germany, as well as its political center.
In 1994, the Allied troops left Berlin after being there since the end of the war in 1945.
In 1998, Potsdamer Platz was officially opened as the new center of Berlin.
In 1999, the German federal government moved to Berlin, although some offices stayed behind in Bonn.
Recommended videos, Berlin.
Top 10 reasons to visit Berlin.
10 best things to do in Berlin.
History of Berlin.
Berlin, table of contents.
Thanks for watching.